Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back into another edition of the Big Ten Show UCLA version, the second UCLA episode. So we need some UCLA fans. Wow, I can't talk. To rock heavy with us. We're talking before the show, USC and Oregon, very good friends with UCLA fans. USC, Oregon rocked with our program overviews of theirs very heavy. So we need UCLA fans to show out for this one. But first things first, my name is Justin Adams. My co-host over there, Sunny Verma. Sunny, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah, I'm super excited. We've had good showings for the rivals of Bruins fans. So hopefully UCLA fans, you kind of show up today and, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It's exciting times for Big Ten show and the Big Ten conference in general.
Absolutely. And Will, go ahead. Do you want to tell people where they can find you? And
yeah, absolutely, guys. First and foremost,
I do want to say a big thank you for you to coming on first and foremost and being gracious with your time to come on here. So I just want to get that out of the way. And then, if you want to tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, first and foremost, guys, thank you so much for having me on. Big fan of what you guys are building here. It's an honor to be here to talk some UCLA Bruins, some Big Ten football. I heard you guys have some questions for me. I've got a lot of questions for you guys when it comes to Big Ten and what it means for UCLA to be coming out to one of the greatest territories of football we have in this great country of the US of A. So, yeah, man, a lot of great stuff. You can find me. I'm on the Los Angeles Football Network. If you happen to be in the LA area, Southern California area, or even syndicated in San Diego, we got ESPN radio show out here, 1090 ESPN The Might here. We have the LA Football Show. I do the UCLA segment of that. So check us out, man. A lot of great stuff going on, and we're honored to be a part of the Big Ten, man. So we're very, very fired up to be here, and especially with you guys, Sunny and Justin.
Happy to have you, man. Sunny, go ahead.
Well, should we start with basketball this time? I feel like when you think UCLA, you kind of think basketball first. Is that fair?
Let's do it, man.
All right. I mean, well, you guys have had a busy transfer portal season, and obviously you have one of the more rigid personalities. Is that kind of fair to say as your head coach in Mick Cronin? Tell me, what are the vibes coming in right now for Bruins basketball fans coming into the offseason?
I don't think the vibes could actually be higher. I'm going to be honest. They had the number one transfer portal class in college basketball coming in, and it really started. Last year was a very down year. It wasn't totally not to be expected. The NIL game caught up with UCLA in a sense where they had to go international for a lot of these recruits last year in order to compete with the big dogs that were getting out the NIL money. So last year, you had a couple guys come in. You had a couple Europeans come in, people that were trying to fit in that had never been to America, never spoke the language, let alone trying to learn how to play basketball over here. So just a lot of problems with that. The program kind of ponies up a little bit in the offseason. You're talking about guys, when you think of NBA lineage and who can, provide some of these NIL funds, Kevin Love is here, Zach LaVine, these type of guys are out here. Norman Powell, Russell Westbrook are kind of, helping get the NIL back for UCLA basketball. And I was critical of the team last year. And I think in a lot of ways, you could have expected a significant downfall from what happened when you lose guys like Jaime Jaquez balling for the Miami Heat right now. You're losing guys like Tiger Campbell, who may not be to a professional basketball fan, a household name, but this guy was one of the best point guards within the Pac-12 for 2 to 3 years at that point in time. So you're losing just stalwarts with the program that really built up the Mick Cronin era. Down year last year, they went 15-17, wasn't ideal. But coming into this next season, they have made all of the commitments and all of the right decisions on how they're building this program up. Guys, they have 6 dudes coming in the transfer portal alone, all pretty quality players that should see significant minutes for UCLA next year. The most satisfying, if you ask UCLA fans, was they got 2-time Pac-12 all-defensive team forward, Kobe Johnson from USC. So that one was a little bit sweeter than some of the other ones coming from the rivalry there. So you get Kobe Johnson from there. You add a guy like William Kyle, who I don't think a lot of people know about, from South Dakota State. This guy was the defensive player of the year within his conference. You got Eric Daly coming in. A lot of eligibility left from Oklahoma State. Had some significant offers coming out of high school. And then you get a guy like Sky Clark coming in there too. Point guard. The last time we saw this guy on a basketball court had 36 points against the NC State Wolfpack in the ACC tournament, a team that went to the Final Four, mind you. So there's just a lot of good stuff coming in with the
Former
mojo.
Illini too, I might add.
Exactly, yeah. So you have him coming through. Sky Clark's, I mean, this is his third school. This is the current version of college sports nowadays, guys.
Right.
You may remember a guy that was on one team and like 2 teams later, he's still playing and figuring out his college situation. So just a lot of great stuff. I didn't even bring up Dominic Harris, who shot 45% from 3 last year, a problem that UCLA really needed to figure out was the long distance shooting. And then Eric Daly, just a guy you can plug in immediately and, play some very, very solid minutes. Tyler Bilodeau from Oregon State coming down. So just lots of dudes. In terms of how the fan base feels about it, I'm going to have to watch it play out for a few games before I'm this confident with that decision. A lot of people are saying Final Four or bust, coming in, which is how deep this transfer portal class was, the pedigree that Mick Cronin is, because he really built up UCLA in a lot of ways. And the fan base, for all the faults last year, and how the team was constructed, how it, really played out, the fan base loves Mick Cronin, loves this dude. He's a hard ass. He's a tough guy, tough son of a gun. He's just that old school coach that's going to ride you and just make you better at the end of the day. And I think a lot of people relate to that kind of, with what the coaching world is nowadays. So Mick Cronin really has the fan base's heart. And listen, if he can tap into that energy and bring these new guys along quicker than expected, Final Four might be, relatively in play for UCLA basketball. So a lot to be excited about. A lot of great things going on out here in Westwood, man.
Yep. And I guess my question will be, how do you feel like UCLA fits into the, current state of the Big Ten? And do you think they've done enough over the offseason to kind of address some of the issues that they had last year?
Yeah, in terms of basketball or football specifically?
Oh, basketball. Just another
basketball?
Yeah.
I do. I think Mick at his core is a Midwest guy. Like where he made his bread was at Cincinnati. I know it wasn't the Big Ten, but similar set of country, within the United States. A guy that kind of, for a lack of a better word, bust your ass out there as a coach trying to get you better. To me, that's Big Ten basketball. When I look at like Tom Izzo, some of these guys back in the day, those Ohio State teams with Greg Oden, Mike Conley, those teams were very much aligned, like the way Mick Cronin coaches. So I actually think his style is more Big Ten-esque than it was Pac-12, because Pac-12, I think to a lot of people, is more finesse style, kind of like, hey, shoot the three. If it goes in, we'll do that. But with Mick Cronin on the basketball floor, it's more, I'm going to guard you 90 feet all the way to the other basket. And I think it perfectly fits for them on the hardwood. Football is a little different of a story, I think, when it comes into that. And we could definitely dive into that a little further. But I think as terms of basketball, I think they're well positioned to, take on the conference. Granted, a lot more tough basketball-wise. Yep. They may have the firepower with this transfer portal class to, get in there and really make some noise in year one in the Big Ten.
Absolutely.
So we'll, again, Justin and I are kind of new to, new teams coming in from the West Coast. And obviously we're familiar with the UCLA and USC rivalry. Anyone who pays attention to college sports is. Now, when you talk about all this new NIL and money coming into the UCLA basketball program, do you think, is that kind of has to do with the balance? Because USC's kind of considered the natural, the power in football. And UCLA is known as one of the blue bloods when it comes to basketball. Do you think, with USC having Lincoln Riley, a Heisman Trophy winner from 2 years ago, it's one of those where the alums feel an obligation to, pump the money in to make sure that UCLA maintains itself as a premium brand in basketball?
Totally. I think that's how the alumni fan base, builds themselves. UCLA is a basketball school, and they mean that in every sense of the word. When you walk into Pauley Pavilion at UCLA, you walk past royalty. I mean, I don't think there's a bigger name in the history of college basketball than John Wooden. You know what I mean? So we're walking past the John Wooden kind of memorial. A lot of his stuff that he had on his desk is hanging in Pauley Pavilion. And I mean, you're going through the list of guys that have donned, the blue and gold. It goes all the way from, Kareem to Bill Walton, Marcus Johnson. I mean, it goes all the way up till the 90s. And the guys that I was mentioning, like Kevin Love and Zach LaVine, I mean, even Baron Davis back in the mid-90s. So it's just historically speaking, it is the dominant basketball school on the West Coast. And that's very much how the alumni and fan base views themselves. They also view themselves as a very competitive football school. But if you ask them what's their favorite sport or who do they pay attention to the most, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that follows football a little bit more than basketball when it comes to UCLA fan base.
For sure.
Just another question about basketball. We kind of referenced Cronin a little bit. He's a coach. Well, some people like, and some people think he might be a little bit too old school. Let me put it that way. And again, the Illinois coach is the same way. Brad Underwood. Some people don't like the fact that he reminds you more traditionally of like the late '80s type of angry type of coach. With Cronin, as you kind of referenced earlier, it was a disappointing season. 15-16, or 15-16, and 10-10 in the conference. Obviously, there's a lot of optimism coming into this year. As you said, 6 new players in the transfer portal. Now, should things not quite work out, like me personally, knowing my experience with Sky Clark, I'm going to be interested in watching how that relationship works, because it didn't work with Brad Underwood. And I see Cronin kind of like a clone of what Underwood is. So like that's kind of a relationship I'm going to be, keeping my eyes on. Let's put it that way. Let's say things don't work out. There's too many new faces, and UCLA stumbles out of the block and finishes with maybe not a 500 record, but obviously not reaching Final Four aspirations. Is there any sort of warm seat or anything for Mick, or is he pretty established there right now that it would take a couple seasons of disappointments for him to go anywhere?
I think if he dramatically fails of expectations next year, it could already be in the water there, I would say, in terms of the hot seat, because in a lot of fronts, there's a large contingent of the fan base. And I know the majority of them really likes Mick and appreciates him. This was kind of his first year where he had, people speaking negatively in terms of the team and what was happening out there. There's definitely some naysayers when it came to the belief of Mick Cronin moving forward. He solidified that in the meantime. You could do everything right in recruiting. Ultimately, it's going to show what happens when it comes down to the basketball court and how you're going to be able to approach it on that end of things. So I think with Mick, let's say you're like an 11 or 12 seed with this roster. I don't know if he gets fired, but the hot seat is very, very, intense at that point, I would say. Just given the number 1 transfer portal class, right. You've got one of your top scorers returning, Sebastian Mack. Dylan Andrews really made a jump as one of the guards. And lastly, they actually picked away. This happened just a couple days ago. They got a McDonald's All-American in Trent Perry, who was from Harvard Westlake out here, initially committed to USC. And then USC situation kind of happens where the head coach, I'm unfortunately blanking on his name. He went to SMU. He was the guy at Florida Gulf Coast a long time ago. You may know who I'm talking about, but long story short, he bolts for SMU. They kind of implode, and Trent Perry opens up his recruitment. He is now going to UCLA. So you have another McDonald's All-American in the fold on top of that transfer portal class. So listen, it's going to get hot if he's not a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. I'll put it to you that way.
Is that a prediction?
Can we
get a prediction to close out the basketball side? Can we get a prediction? Are you into prediction?
Yeah, I'll make a prediction. I think for me, as somebody that covers the program and the organization, if they do not even make it to the Sweet 16, it's a failure given the talent level.
Gotcha. Sweet 16.
I think Sweet 16 is the bottom if they were to, be anything close to what I imagine them to, and they're healthy and everything's going well for them. So anything less than the Sweet 16, I think there's a lot of room for disappointment there.
And I'm guessing, since the general consensus that they will potentially be a Final Four team, I'm guessing championship is the ceiling, of course, in that regard. So
100%. I think when you add 6 guys to a roster, I think I'm a big Bill Simmons fan. That's one of the reasons I got into podcasting. And he's always said it takes 8 to 9 guys to win a championship, whether it's the NBA for basketball specifically.
Yeah.
I fully agree. So you have 3 guys really returning that are big names. We have Sebastian Mack, Dylan Andrews, and Ade Mara is kind of this freshman. He was the best of the Euros that we got in last year when NIL became a problem. So he's going to be developed a little bit more by the time it tips off next season. And you got these 6 guys coming in. And then you add Trent Perry, who I didn't even mention. You have another top 100 recruit in that recruiting class. I mean, you got 11 guys. There's no reason to not, make it far. And I know the Big Ten's intense, and it's going to be a lot harder than it was in the Pac-12. But, when you have that level of talent, there's just not an excuse to not, perform to that level. So, championship is the ceiling for the team in Westwood this year. For the first time in a long time, may I add.
We'll go from the basketball court to the gridiron. And UCLA football, obviously had a coaching change kind of last minute with Brian Kelly deciding to take the offensive coordinator job. at Ohio State. And I'm trying to be respectful when I say this, but the hire of Deshaun Foster was met with kind of lukewarm, a response from the national media and the fan base. He wasn't exactly on, too high up some coaching candidates lists, I guess you can kind of say. What was your opinion on it? Did you like the hire at the time?
In the moment, I thought it was a good hire, specifically for this season. I was a little worried about experience-wise. I think long-term, he had been only a running backs coach, but to his credit on that, he had been one of the best running backs coaches within college football. And there's a long line. I mean, I could pose, what's his name? Alfred, that was at Ohio State for a couple of years, and he put all those pros out there. He's dealing with 4 or 5-star guys in the regular, right? So, I mean, these guys, odds are they're very good players. I'm sure he raised their ceilings in a lot of regards, but these guys had a real good shot at making the NFL regardless without Alfred. When you look at what Deshaun Foster did with the running backs room, first guy he put in the NFL is a guy named Joshua Kelly. He plays for the Los Angeles Chargers right now. This guy was an unranked recruit, transferred down from UC Davis, does the Deshaun Foster program, running back school, whatever you want to call it. He's in the NFL. He's drafted. Next guy he puts in the league, a guy by the name of Demetric Felton. Felton was a wide receiver at the high school level. Played a little bit of running back, but big switch from when you initially step on campus, running back, moving to running back from wide receiver. He gets drafted by the Cleveland Browns. And then Zach Charbonnet is kind of his biggest project, if you will. Charbonnet was a very talented top 50, top 60 recruit coming from Oaks Christian High School. He had that going for him, but he found the bench at Michigan when Blake Corum really kind of got cooking a couple of years ago at U of M. So Charbonnet comes to UCLA, his confidence is down. Deshaun Foster completely rebuilds it. Lo and behold, by the time Charbonnet leaves campus and heads off to become a second-round pick in the NFL draft, Charbonnet is one of the best running backs we've had at UCLA, period. And it's up there with the Maurice Jones-Drews and some of the greats that they've had there. Every guy that he really kind of put his hat on and was allowed to kind of, mentor in a lot of different ways, they got to their highest potential. The team loved him. And, I think in the moment we were all kind of, questioning what was going to happen with that. They'd have to surround it with the right coaches. That's what they've done, man. You look at some of the coaches that they brought in. Eric Bieniemy was the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs 2 years ago, leading them to a Super Bowl victory with the likes of Mahomes, Kelsey, Andy Reid. He's now the offensive coordinator at UCLA. This guy knows what he's doing when it comes to the offensive ball. So having a guy that not only can help mentor Deshaun Foster in the art of play calling, because I think every coach, whether it's, your Jim Harbaughs or your Ryan Days or whatever it may be, they have their offensive and defensive side of things. So if Foster can master the offensive side of things and kind of let a defensive-minded coach kind of run that side of the football, I think he's in a great spot. You have Bieniemy, who I mentioned, Tim White, who's the quarterback's coach, was the Houston Texans quarterback's coach a few years ago, so he has pro lineages there as well. You bring in offensive line coach Juan Castillo, who another Andy Reid disciple, was there in the Philly years of Andy Reid. This guy gets a lot of credit for developing Kelsey at the beginning of his career in the center position. Jason Peters, a longtime all-pro tackle. So these guys, the guys that they've surrounded him with, makes Deshaun's job easier. So when you saw the trickling in of qualified coaches to help him with his inaugural year of being a head coach, it made more and more sense, I think, to the fan base. And you couple that with what he's done in the transfer portal and what he's done in the recruiting ranks. I mean, they just landed a 4-star running back today. We talked about Madden, the quarterback, Nico's younger brother, 4-star out here in Southern California. He just got a crystal ball to UCLA. And then what they've been doing, I went to every single, UCLA spring football practice this year. And I got to see the team and see their strengths and weaknesses. He has addressed those strengths and weaknesses through the transfer portal to a T already. He's doing everything right on paper. I think mostly, when you talk to UCLA fans, we are just very happy with what the job he's doing right now and how he's building out the program moving forward. Granted, it's going to be time before we get to see that on the field. But in terms of the PR, I mean, this guy started crying at the press conference. He played at UCLA. He's doing everything right. So, when the more you see of Deshaun, at least this offseason, the better it's been. And the fans are really kind of, embracing the fact that Deshaun Foster is building UCLA and that this is his dream job moving forward. He's doing a hell of a job of it to start.
And speaking of the coaching candidates, Tony White, as a Nebraska fan, it was very, very interesting. Tony White was one of the, leading candidates for the job as well, a UCLA alum. In regards to the overall UCLA fan base, who, in your opinion, who was the overwhelming favorite that people wanted, and who personally did you want if it was up to you?
So Tony White was actually one of the highest, PR scores, if you will, when it came to people that wanted him. A guy that had played football at UCLA, a guy that's well respected as a D coordinator, first for his job at Syracuse, and now with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Really good recruiter too, by all accounts. From everything I've heard, I know you could probably speak to that a little bit more as a Nebraska guy. But yeah, Tony White was up there for a lot of people. Bieniemy was a name that I floated out there because he actually got. He's a running backs coach at UCLA for a long time. So was a guy that I was targeting. I didn't know how realistic it was. And then lo and behold, he becomes our, offensive coordinator off this. So that was a very nice and shrewd hire by Martin Jarman, the athletic director at UCLA. We floated out some other names that we thought made a lot of sense. The fan base did not like a lot of those. David Shaw being one of them, former Stanford coach. His son is actually a walk-on player at UCLA. So Carter Shaw. So there's a lot of dynamics there that made sense. He's out of work right now, no longer with Stanford. I think he's kind of enjoying the post-coaching life. He did a lot of great things at Stanford, but he also really kind of tanked there at the end. And I don't know if he's a full believer in the NIL factor. So a lot of the fan base kind of wanted to distance himself a little bit from that on that front. So, yeah, I mean, Tony White was up there for sure. There's a couple other names. Every fan base has these home run swings when it comes to, who they want.
Yeah.
People are throwing out Urban Meyer. I'm get realistic.
I was about to say Urban Meyer comes out every time there's an opening.
Meyer, I'm man. The one that I would have wanted, and I just don't know if he wants to coach anymore, period. Chris Peterson was a hell of a coach, man. Boise State, Washington. He got Washington in the college football playoff. He's a West Coast guy. He lives in LA. I thought that was significantly more likely than your likes of Urban Meyer. But Peterson, unfortunately, I just think he's a happy camper. He doesn't want to do the stress of coaching, and not to mention it's a whole different ball game now with this NIL stuff. You're kind of like a GM when it comes to football as well, as opposed to just coaching and getting these guys in there. So I don't know if he wants to do it again. But Foster, in terms of how he's embraced NIL and how he's embraced the modern day of college football, it's looking really damn good now. So I think there's a lot of great stuff to go off of with Foster. And he's killing it in the early part. So I think UCLA, for all intents and purposes, if you ask me today, I say they nailed the hire. Catch up with me in October, mid, Big Ten season. They've got a murderer's row of a schedule out there. We have a 3-week stretch, guys. Check this out. LSU in Baton Rouge, Penn State at Penn State, one of the most intimidating places. And then we go home and we play Oregon, who, should be competing for the Big Ten title if everything we've seen is accurate. So that's a 3-week stretch, continuous opponents right there. So it's just, there's a lot going on there. I think they need to 7-8 wins this year, which they've got a lot of talent returning. That would be a roaring success for a guy like Deshaun Foster in year one.
So that's what I was going to actually ask. I saw the over/under for UCLA was at 5.5, at least as of about an hour ago. So a bowl game. Essentially that's going to be make or break whether the over hits. Is that how you look at it? Would you be happy with 6 wins, or would you be or I guess the other question is more would you be upset with winning only 5 despite, completely brand new coaching staff? I know you guys have been killing it on the recruiting trail. I know that because it's on my timeline, it seems like a new 4-star every week is committing to you guys. But, obviously talent sometimes takes time to develop. I'm talking about 2024, 2025. Where do you see the Bruins season going?
So for this year, it's going to be tough because I think, and I mentioned that 3-game stretch of LSU, Penn State, Oregon, it's easy to get in bad habits when momentum is bad, and that's at the beginning of the season. So that one's going to be tough. I don't expect them to win any of those games. I'm not a delusional optimist when it comes to some of these teams. But where I would say is, they had this graph that was released in terms of college football on returning percentage of, productive players, people that came out with a lot of their rushing yards or receiving yards or whatever it be. And outside of really, if I'm being honest, like Liatu Latu, who was the first defensive player off the board in the NFL draft, and you can't replace that guy. That guy was like the heart and soul of UCLA football the past 2 years. But really, outside of Latu, most of the production's coming back next year. Murphy twins too. These two, edge rushers we had, they left as well. But you look at what they have, and they got a quarterback, Ethan Garbers. Confidence, I've seen this up close and personal from quarterbacks. It comes from two areas for me in terms of a first-year starter. How did you do in your rivalry game, and did you win the bowl game? And Ethan Garbers passed both those tests with flying colors. Beat USC, a Caleb Williams-led team, may I add, at the Coliseum last year, and then led UCLA their first bowl win since, the 2017, 2014 campaign or whatever it may be. 2017 was the last bowl game they were in. The last win they got was the Alamo Bowl back in 2014. So the fact that Ethan Garbers led them to their first bowl win in close to a decade, beat the rivalry team, did it without, turning the ball over. He's a very efficient quarterback. There's a lot to like there. Quarterback's the biggest part of the puzzle. It always will be when it comes to football. They got him coming back, and he's going to be confident. He looked really good in spring ball. They got TJ Harden, who's a very explosive running back there. They were able to convince one of the transfer running backs, Keegan Jones, after Chip Kelly left, hey, come on back. I'm your running backs coach. We're going to give you the rock as much as you want. Let's do it. So they got the running backs back there. I'm telling you what, when you think of LA football in the wide receiver position, you traditionally think of USC, whether it's Keyshawn Johnson being the first wide receiver taken number 1 overall in the draft, Marquise Lee, Drake London, Michael Pittman Jr., these type of guys at USC across town, those are who they traditionally produce. This is the best UCLA receiving core I've seen as somebody that has covered the team. J. Michael Sturdivant is the stud we've gotten from Cal, who, granted, did not really have the time to develop, with the quarterback carousel that was Colin Schlee, who just transferred to Virginia Tech, Dante Moore, former 5-star now at Oregon, and Garbers kind of coming in. But Garbers and him linked up in the bowl game. It was 4 catches, 142 yards, a touchdown. Logan Loya, the top receiver, coming back next year as well. We just got a Notre Dame wide receiver transfer, Enrico Flores, who's pretty outstanding in his own right. A lot of firepower on the offensive end. I still think I'd like to see them add an edge rusher and maybe one more offensive lineman when it comes to that area. But I'm very comfortable with the linebackers. I'm very comfortable with the secondary. Listen, if it wasn't that much of a murderer's row when it came to that LSU, Oregon, and Penn State, I think we could be talking about 6-7 wins in the regular season, maybe going to a bowl game. If they still somehow get to those highs, I think you can only, give Deshaun Foster an A grade with what he's doing. But a lot of returning talent, surprisingly, for a team that, is expected to win 5.5 games. Just more of a credit to the schedule at hold when it comes to UCLA football.
So in looking and going back to the Deshaun Foster hire and just kind of everything you're mentioning, what is the realistic timeline for him? And then what, when we're talking about a realistic timeline, what level is he supposed to get them to? Like, what is anticipated the ceiling for UCLA that realistically you think they can get to?
Man, well, if he's recruiting like this and the development continues, and it's hard to really kind of evaluate that out because Bieniemy is an offensive coordinator who could easily take another head coaching job or, another offensive coordinator job at either the next level or the college football level very soon. For Deshaun, it's more about how these coaches around him that have been there, like Juan Castillo's like a 40 to 50-year offensive line coach that knows his way around. I mentioned about Bieniemy. If they can kind of get him up to speed quick enough, which I think has to be within a year or two, I think he can do very successful, win 9-10 games. And, what's the Jim Harbaugh line? It's like, we want to compete for the Big Ten championship every year. That's the goal.
Yep.
That's got to be the goal for every team in this conference. If they're recruiting like this and the development's there's a real shot at that. I think if they're in that top 25, top 30, what I've tried to tell UCLA fans is our goal is we're not going to be the Ohio States. We're not going to be the Penn States, even the USCs or Oregons to that extent. The teams that I would like them to kind of emulate is the Michigan States under the Mark D'Antonio run, where it's like every 4 years you kind of have a shot to win the Big Ten championship. Michigan State made the college football playoff back when they had Connor Cook back in the day, or Iowa in some regards. Maybe a better offense than Iowa. Yeah. I think we can all agree. But, Iowa has those every 3 to 4 years. They're like a top 15 team. They're competing, at the highest level.
Like last year, 10-2 last year. And that fair catch away from 11-1.
oh, dude, give them like a top 60 offense. And like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like that offense, it burns my eyes trying
They
to
can't
watch.
recruit a quarterback. I don't know why they can't recruit a quarterback there.
It makes no sense to me if you see the tight ends that have come out there, the time you're going to get with their offensive linemen. Like, man, I was genuinely like a confusing thing for me as a fan of college football. So I get it. But like, in terms of the model of like when your guys are seniors, like, and I know I'm like hitting on all the Big Ten kind of mottos right now, but it's still Bo Schembecker line. Like, if you stay, we'll be champions, right? You know what I mean? Like, if they do that to an extent where it's like you get here, in 4 years, we're going to be competing in a Big Ten or a situation where you can get into a Big Ten title game. That's a success for UCLA football. For basketball, it's probably a little different. It's probably like, every 5 years, you got to want to have 2 to 3 Big Ten or, college basketball champion. I know that's ambitious, but I'm just telling you, this is how Blue Bloods think when it comes to college basketball. But in terms of football, if you're kind of in that range where it's competing, there's just a lot of good stuff there. And I think you made a comment before the show. You're like, I'm trying to figure out who the rivals are and like who kind of fits who. The natural comparison for UCLA going into the Big Ten, athletically speaking, I would say is Michigan State. Like, if they can kind of get that hybrid, because I know Mel Tucker, flamed out when it came to Michigan State. That first year was humming there, right? And they got the college basketball program doing good stuff. If they can kind of like match that energy and like, kind of be in that range where the basketball's humming and the football's 9 or 10 wins, that's pretty damn good when it comes for UCLA football.
Absolutely. And then, so, transitioning over to the recruiting, and you had mentioned a couple guys earlier. So Madden Iamaliva, and I again, earlier, I don't know if this part gets edited out when I was talking about him earlier, but I had a hard time pronouncing his name. I'm waiting for one of them to enter the portal so I can just call him Iamaliva, I guess. Yeah. That's what it looks like to me. So, like, that's just what I'm referring to him as now. I just can't wait for one of them to hit the portal. Hopefully it's not the one that not trying to speak that into existence. Maybe it's his brother. But, but realistically, he's the hot, commodity right now in terms of UCLA's target because, again, TJ Lateef committed to Nebraska. I do think UCLA, regardless, had the best shot at him anyways, Matt Iamaliva. I think TJ Lateef was always Nebraska's guy. I think this guy was always a UCLA guy. But, in terms of him, your realistic shot to land him, but then also outside of him, who are some other guys that you think that UCLA needs to land in this 2024 class to really kind of start making some headway into their progression and improve some of the areas that you saw that have been kind of struggling the last few years?
Yeah, I think for me, it starts with one guy in particular. There's an interior offensive lineman that came to campus this past weekend. His name is Darius Afaleva. I think I'm pronouncing that name right as well. But in order to succeed in the Big Ten, and this is my interpretation of the conference, Pac-12 had it pretty damn good when it came to quarterbacks, if I'm being honest. Like Caleb Williams was here. We had, Bo Nix, top 12 pick in the draft. Michael Penix. For like 3 of the first 5 quarterbacks were Pac-12 guys. That's just kind of like it's the West Coast quarterback kind of motto there. How you win in the Big Ten is the trenches, my friends. Like that Michigan national championship team, and I know they had McCarthy, but that guy was throwing like 9 to 15 times a game sometimes, and they were crushing teams. For me, it's in the trenches. I want to build up the offensive line to a Big Ten level of offensive line, as well as the D tackles and the ends coming off the edge there. But the guy for me is Darius Alfalfa. This guy's offered by LSU, Oklahoma, Washington, like big name brands. They had him on campus this week, and they did a big Mother's Day kind of event for recruits that went over very, very well with everyone involved. That's where they got the Madden I am a leaver, if you will, as you like to say.
I'm a leaver.
I'm a leaver. Yeah. He was got the crystal ball this weekend when it came to him coming out. And Carson Cox, the tailback, the 4-star running back that just committed today, he also was kind of in the mix there. So for me, that's where I'm really going to believe we're a Big Ten football team when we start getting the linemen and the pedigree of those linemen to really look some of these teams in the eye that come to the Big Ten, because this is big boy football now, man. This is, I'm going to move you from A to B, and my running back is going to get 4 to 5 yards, and that's how we're going to move you down the field. Like, that's really what it's all about. So that's the guy that I'm really looking at, and other offensive linemen of those caliber. I know they've done well in the transfer portal. They got a guard from UNLV, Alani Makaheli. This guy started 13 games for them last year, and they got Houston's right tackle, their left tackle, Patrick Paul, got drafted this past year in the NFL draft. Ruben Unije coming over. I think he was an Illinois guy at some point, or commit at some point in time. We had him on the show. He's coming over. So as long as you're bolstering the trenches, those are where I would be looking at for the recruits and how they can succeed moving forward.
Gotcha.
Now, just kind of taking a step back and looking at the big picture, there was news today that, UCLA is going to have to pay $10 million to the University of Cal for the next 3 years. Now, originally it was supposed to be 7 years, I think. And I think now the ruling was it's going to be 3 years, and then they're going to kind of revisit this whole thing. Can you just kind of explain to us what that is all about?
Yes. So Cal and UCLA are a part of the UC system out here, and they're kind of the breadwinners of the UC system, right? USC is a private school, so they don't really factor into this as much when it comes to their decision making. But in terms of the UC governing board, we have UC Davis, we got UC Santa Barbara, which, guys, by the way, not a football school, but that might be the best school in the country to go to. It's on the beach, it's fantastic. UC Merced, it's near the top. There's just a lot of UC schools, and UCLA and Cal are the most famous of those schools, right? Yeah. So USC is the first school, and this is all coming from the top donor. I'm like paraphrasing for Casey Wasserman, who's UCLA's top donor. So USC, they're the first to decide under Mike Bone, who was Cincinnati's AD for a long time, got Lincoln Riley to USC, made the Big Ten move. He was the guy that kind of spearheaded this thing. And to his credit, he didn't call Cal. He called UCLA, rivalry within Los Angeles, and said, hey, we want to make this jump. We want to make it with somebody, and we want to keep this rivalry preserved. What do you guys think about coming into the Big Ten? And Martin Jarman, who's a fantastic athletic director in his own regard, was like, let's do it. I started my career at Michigan State. I worked under, what's his name? Gene Smith, who was at Ohio State AD. Yep. He was there for a long time back in the day. So he was like, I have Big Ten ties. Like, this makes a lot of sense. This is kind of the area of sports I want to be in. So they jumped. Cal was kind of, the team that was asleep during this process, and they were noticeably pissed about it. It's like a bitter divorce between somebody out there, man. Mm-hmm. And Cal, to its credit, tried suing UCLA. It took it to a lot of different court cases. Ultimately came out to the term that's now dubbed calimony, because it's within the California school district. UCLA is going to have to fork over about $10 million for the next 3 years. Cal, on the other hand, still kind of figuring out where they're going. Like, the ACC thing with Cal and Stanford, like, is that 100% happening at this point? Because I don't really know. But they're kind of left without a life raft at this point. So it's just, It's a bitter divorce. Having a good authority, the chancellors are not speaking to each other. It's a very acrimonious situation right now between the two schools that were once side by side in terms of having the Pac-12 be what it is and elevating the conference on so many different things. So it is a weird situation. And to make matters worse, UCLA just got another Cal transfer. We got a couple of Cal transfers in the roster when it comes to football. So, their fan base already hates us, but we took maybe 2 of their 3 best players last year, and we just got a secondary addition there, Kalen Moore from yesterday. So it is a tough one right now. Cal fans are bitter. They're upset. And, I think we'd like to have them in the Big Ten. I don't know what the deal is with that. I'd love to add Stanford and Cal, but we'll see how that kind of plays out moving forward. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Tough one right now. $10 million from the athletic department going to Cal.
Yeah. And it's, you talk about it, you're kind of on the same side at a certain point, but just the way money works, the way college football is, where everything is just kind of like, I don't know. It's all about who can outmaneuver who. And I don't know if there's a ton of friends right now. Even the Big Ten and the SEC used to be, our rivals and enemies, but have worked together too in their joint, meetings and stuff like that as well. So it's a weird time for college football in general. But if we could just, you mentioned before you had some questions for us as well. So, we can open the floor to any questions that you may have for us. And for those who may not know, I'm a Nebraska fan. Sonny is an Illinois fan and covers Illinois football as well. So go ahead.
Dude, it's an honor, man. I'm fired up. And first and foremost, it was such a blast, dude. I need to get you guys on our show to kind of educate the fan base about the Big Ten, where to go. I'm going to start with you, Justin. I got some questions. Matt Rule hire was a big deal in the moment. Year one's kind of passed. Where do you kind of stand with Matt Rule? And like, talk to me about, you guys got the #1 recruit in the country from a guy that he left Arizona. He was playing high school football in Georgia to be closer to Kirby Smart. Like, how does that even happen? I know his dad had played at Nebraska, but give me your, kind of consensus feel on Dylan Raiola up in Nebraska and just the whole Matt Rule experience for Husker fans to begin with.
Yeah. So Matt Rule, initially when he was hired, I was a big Fickle guy, and I really wanted Luke Fickell. And, so Matt Rule got hired, and I was kind of like, nah, but I'm always one of those guys that's like, I'm going to wait and see, because all of the coaching hires that I've gotten ecstatic about have failed. And so I'm like, you know what, maybe the recipe isn't getting the big name. Maybe the recipe is in, and just kind of trusted in Trev Alberts to be able to find the right guy. And he 100% has. Matt Rule has come in and basically changed the entirety of the culture. The culture was so bad under Scott Frost. Scott Frost was, when Scott Frost was recruiting Dylan Raiola, he actually changed the visit to Raiola to a Zoom call because he got drunk the night before, supposedly. There was a lot of stuff. He was missing meetings. He was, he missed the opening meeting when we were in Ireland for the Northwestern game. It's like, you're in Ireland for the game and you missed the meeting. So what Matt Rule came in here to do is he really changed the culture. He brought his guys in here, got the messaging the right way, but he's a big proponent of family culture building and getting the right guys in place. And so far he has done that. Now, just to make a long story short, because I could spend all day on this offseason, going to what happened with Raiola, so Dylan Raiola's dad, has his, number in the stadium, a legend of Nebraska football. His uncle is our offensive line coach, Donovan, but his uncle was our offensive line coach when he committed to Georgia, so essentially what I think happened was the whole Frost thing. I don't think it really sat right with Dylan. Right. But what Dylan had come back and said after he transitioned and switched over to Nebraska was he started to see the right things falling into place. And he didn't see that with the previous staff. And after a season of kind of watching how everything went, Matt Rule had stated he doesn't continue to recruit players when they commit somewhere else. He will let them, he always has that open dialogue and they can always reach back out to him, but he's not going to sit there and push and commit, try to get somebody to commit if they've already committed. And Dylan actually reached out to him. It seemed Dylan had somewhat of a change of heart a little bit. And he said Nebraska was always home. Like Nebraska always felt like home to him. I think he might've got caught up in the pomp and circumstance of going out there because his visit to Georgia was the national championship game that year when they blew out. Yeah. So he got to go out there and see all that, and Kirby Smart be out there with him and all the lights and the cameras and everything. And, this is the team, and I think he kind of got caught up in that because he the crystal ball started coming in. He eventually committed to Georgia, moved out to Buford to play over there in Georgia. And it came together quick. We had, I'm drawing a blank. Was it Kyle McCord? Ohio State. Will Kyle McCord. Like I get them mixed up because they're like the same person in my mind.
Yeah.
Like they're the same person to me and the same quarterback. But Kyle McCord was supposed to come visit. And then, he was scheduled to come visit. And then all of a sudden, a couple days later in that week, we all of a sudden get news that Dylan Raiola is scheduling an official. So then things get weird. We're like, okay, we got 2 QBs coming to visit. Kyle McCord ends up committing somewhere else. And that was pretty much the indication that probably Dylan Raiola is in the bag for Nebraska. Turns out he commits. And, it's one of those things where people are talking about, oh, he went to 4 different high schools. What makes you, and he decommitted from Georgia. He went to 4 different high schools because his parents were moving him to play school. They wanted him to be close, you said, closer to Kirby Smart. And they wanted him to play against certain level competition. And that wasn't his doing. He had the choice to go over to Georgia and admitted that, hey, my heart wasn't in this decision and his heart was in Nebraska. And that's where we're at now. And so what we're seeing from him has been crazy. The spring game, albeit it is a spring game, cautiously optimistic, but we still expected more mistakes even in the spring game than we saw. I do think the first 7 games is very, very favorable for Nebraska. It's an easier slate on the first 7 games of the schedule. that gives him time to get in there and kind of come against, a little less of, I guess, the daunted defenses, and kind of gets his reps with some of these, defenses that are decent. You got a Rutgers in there, very physical defense, but it's teams that he can handle. He gets a shot at Colorado, who's not that good of a team, under the lights in prime time. So he gets a big stage, and I think that's going to help set him up for the rest of the season. So long story short, again, I can talk about this all day. Matt Rule, great hire. I was, like I said, I was very tentative at first, but he has made a believer out of me real quick. And Dylan Raiola is the real deal. And we got his brother Dayton Raiola, who also plays for Buford in the 2026 class, and he grew up a Husker fan too. So his little brother is a quarterback who might be waiting in the wings in the 26 class as well. So,
wow, that's freaking crazy. They could be like, one Raiola can go down, the other one can just come back on the field. That's
crazy.
Nuts.
It's
pretty
wild
nuts stuff, man. And then Sonny, man, like I got to talk to you because I've been so impressed with these dogs that are coming out of University of Illinois football, man. Like Devon Witherspoon, one of my favorite draft prospects. We do a lot of draft prospect stuff when it comes to LA Football Network. Witherspoon ended up being a top 5 pick. Just that dog mentality, man, getting out there, knocking the football away. Huge fan of Witherspoon. And this year, freaking Jerzon Newton coming there playing for Brett Bielema. What is going on with the defenses there is my first question when it comes to Illinois football. And then if you will, and I know this is unprompted, Illinois football is something that I started following when I was young with the Mendenhall Juice Williams team.
Okay.
If you have like a Mount Rushmore of like top 4 Illinois football players of all time, I want to hear it, man. So talk to me about what's going on with the defenses there with Bielema, and then maybe some of the best Illinois football players we've had.
All right, well, we'll start with Lovey. Lovey, actually, he didn't coach much, but he was very, very good at spotting talent that other teams weren't necessarily finding. Whether it's the state of Florida, Devin Witherspoon was a 0-star recruit.
Damn.
Like, nobody recruited him. He just signed on with us. It was a very last-minute type of recruit. Brett Bielema, what he's very good at, and I'd argue he's as good as almost anyone in the country at, is he's been coaching for so long that his Rolodex, when we have a coach opening, like he can call anybody. He's got references everywhere. And so when it comes to developing talent, that's the kind of coach that Illinois needs, because Illinois is not going to get 4-star guys here. We're not going to get 5-star guys here. So when it comes to, Witherspoon and Newton and Randolph and, a couple of the other guys that you were you're referencing, we had 3 the defensive backs drafted in the top 70 picks 2 seasons ago, more than anybody else. It's when we have the talent in that locker room, Brett hires the guys that'll develop them. Now, last year was kind of a transition year, in particular on defense, because as I kind of alluded to, Lovey kind of just stopped recruiting, period. He didn't recruit the state of Illinois at all. I think we went 2 or 3 straight years without recruiting one single Illinois player, which, for a program like Illinois, you have to get your base from locally from the state, because we're not a national brand. So we're kind of in a transition phase, I guess you can kind of say. Brett's now got his guys cycling through, they're going to be playing their 2nd and 3rd years in development. So, we're optimistic. I don't think we have game changers like Newton and Witherspoon on this year's team, but it's actually in contrast. I think we have probably one of the 5 best offenses in the conference this year. We've got a decent quarterback, but our offensive line, when you think of Brett Bielema, you think of good offensive lines. And this particular year, our offensive line is kind of building into shape of what you kind of think of a Bielema team's going to look like. So, it's one of those where, as an Illinois fan, we don't have Big Ten title aspirations when it comes to football. For us, it's let's win. Let's go to a bowl game. Let's win it. Let's go to a bowl game. Let's win it. Let's maybe once in a while, win 9 games. That's our aspirations for the most part. Basketball, of course, a little bit different. We do have national championship aspirations there. Oh yeah, just watch. We've got one of the best running back rooms in the country. Anyways, this is a Nebraska fan. He's in his championship season right now in the offseason.
I'm joking.
But yeah, to answer your original question, I'm trying to think. So Juice Williams has to be on that list. I feel like he turned a lot of fans into Illinois fans. Mendenhall is up there. I really liked Aurelius Ben.
Oh yeah, really
back in the day. Yeah, and
Simeon Rice was Illinois too, right?
Simeon Rice was early 90s though, so it wasn't so much when I was watching. But so we got 3 of them. I know there's someone I'm not thinking of, but honestly, I'll just say one of the 2 guys that we just talked about, Witherspoon. Witherspoon literally shut down half the football field every time he was on the field, and that includes, like, we were very close to beating Michigan 2 years ago, if it wasn't for a very controversial play. And that team could have won 9-10 games, and then the bottom kind of fell out. So I'll say Witherspoon and Newton. I'm going to add to that list too, because Newton's another guy. Again, our defense was not that great last year, but Newton you could see on the field every single time. Like, there's a reason he was mocked at some point in the top 10 in the NFL draft. Unfortunately, he has turns out Jones fractures on both his feet, so that's why he kind of fell, and he just had surgery again. But I'm looking forward to seeing the damage he does for the Washington Commanders moving forward.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say throw Deshaun Newton up there because he's a stud.
Stud, bro.
Yep. Yeah, it is unfortunate what happened though with his injuries, but yeah. All right. Well, Sonny, anything for Will? Will, anything else for us before?
Man, well, I'd love to get together with you guys, get us on the show. Get both you guys on the show, man. We'd love to have that for our Bruin Bible listeners. If you guys ever find yourself in LA, or let's grab a beer and let's do it.
Wow.
Talk shop. I think Nebraska. Are we at Nebraska this year, or are we in? Go for it.
I know we're at USC. I'm trying to remember if we're at UCLA or not. I can pull that up real quick.
If you guys either make it out to LA, man, let's get together. This was a lot of fun. I see how this show is brewing into something special, and it's an honor to be on here, man. This is a blast.
Appreciate that, man. Thank you. Yeah, this year is at Nebraska, so I will definitely let you know if I make it out there, because like I said, I'm in Phoenix, so it's nice to be able to go out to California to watch some games now, right there. So it will be nice. So I'm definitely going to be out checking those out. So
I go to Woodland Hills a lot. One of my close friends lives out there, so it's not too far.
No, wait, Sonny. Yeah, give me a ring next time you're out there, bud. We'll grab a beer, and gonna talk some Illinois basketball this time. We didn't even get to that.
Yeah. No, but man, loved having you on. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, and you've been super kind, and we had a good time talking before the show, during the show. I feel like we go the show all night. So, but. Yeah, thanks again for joining us. Will, do you want to tell the people where they can find you one more time before we go ahead and conclude?
Sure, man. Check us out at the LA Football Network. We do UCLA, USC stuff. We even do professional football in there, Chargers, Rams, draft content, anything you're thinking of LA football based, we got it for you. We're on ESPN Radio out here. Tune into that if you're in the LA area. But that's about it for me, guys. Just plug the LA Football Network and the good people that work at it. And you guys will find some great content there.
We'll link all of his stuff below in the description. Sonny, anything else? And Sonny, do you want to put anything out to the people?
Yeah. For those of you that do know, as we just kind of talked about, I do Illinois content, and I was very fortunate very recently to be approached by the Locked On Network to produce a daily Illinois show. Now, I'm going to be the first of its kind. There's a lot of big publishers out there who do publish Illini content, but I'm going to be the first, and I'm super nervous about this. So I'll have Justin put a link in the description if you guys don't mind. If you can subscribe, I'm going to be, trying to throw out content for you guys every single day. I'm going to try to incorporate, big picture, Big Ten stuff multiple times through the week as well. So, again, it doesn't cost you anything, but it would be a big step in kind of supporting what I do.
Yay!
Congrats, bro. That's huge.
No, for real. Congrats on that, Sonny. Working hard, making moves. So love to see it. But again, Will, thank you. And like Sonny said, links in the description for all of their stuff. Will's stuff, Sonny's stuff. It will all be there. Y'all can always find me on Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football. But that'll do it